Hi everybody, this is SAAD for the Sad Truth. Last night I heard that Twitter had permanently deleted Milo Yiannopoulos' account. Apparently he went after a SNL actress who was starring in the latest instantiation of the Ghostbusters movie. Now I don't know the details of what he said to her, and some are saying that he pretended to be her and sent out anti-Semitic tweets. I don't know all those details, and the minutia doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, it would only matter to the extent that he were to engage in libel or in defamation, or if he were to threaten her with violence. There are very clear benchmarks uh, that, if you like, mitigate First Amendment freedom of speech protection. So I understand that people can be unbelievably nasty, both in person and certainly online. And if anything, I know this only too well because I am the recipient of a lot of this stuff. Just yesterday, there was a guy that I engaged with who was, calling me Juden sad, sort of a term uh, reminiscent of the Nazis. I get all sorts of unbelievably anti-Semitic and Jew-hating comments. I get stuff where people are, attacking me for being overweight. There's all sorts of stuff that people do. Sometimes they're just nasty for no other reason than to be frivolously nasty. I have a guy who's been tweeting endlessly trying to get me fired. I'm a tenured professor, full professor, chaired professor at a major Canadian university. The moron doesn't understand that I can't be fired, but he's been tweeting to my dean and the university and my business school trying to get me fired. That seems to me to be a lot more of a serious action on his part than whatever Milo may or may not have done to this actress. Yet I didn't call for him to be banned. I didn't call for all the Jew haters to be expunged because ultimately you can't be partially pregnant. You're pregnant or not. You either believe in freedom of speech or not. And again, a terribly banal point, but that one that needs to be repeated. Freedom of speech is not there to protect you so that you could give compliments to one another, right? You don't need freedom of speech so that you could tell me, my goodness, God, you have beautiful green eyes. You need freedom of speech precisely to say things that might be objectionable to me. Now, that doesn't mean that I enjoy uh, being uh, the recipient of bad words. If anything, I get very upset by them sometimes. I can't understand why people should be so uncivil, so nasty. And so I'm not in any way supporting or condoning nasty behavior. But you don't uh, purge someone from a platform of discussion because, frankly, they're assholes. And I don't mean that Milo's an asshole, but many people are assholes. I mean, half of Twitter would cease to exist, or the accounts on Twitter would cease to exist if we use the benchmark of, you're being mean to me and you're hurting me and so on. But what I thought I would do today is read to you an article that I wrote back in May 2011. It was an article in response to Satoshi Kanazawa's um very controversial article that he had written on his Psychology Today blog. Satoshi is a evolutionary psychologist at the London School of Economics, so a very prestigious university in England. And he had written an article wherein he had discussed some findings looking at the physical attractiveness of men and women of different races. And I don't remember the exact details, but I think one of the findings that he had discussed, perhaps in not a very delicate and gentle manner, but rather in his typical sort of bombastic ways, was that black women he reported as being less attractive in that particular data set. And then people went absolutely nuts. He should be not only kicked out from being a Psychology Today blogger, he should be fired from his tenured job at the London School of Economics and so on. And as you might imagine, very few academics, if any, as far as I can tell, had come to his defense. But there is someone named Gad Saad who believes in the truth and in justice more so than in virtue signaling. And so I had written an article titled "Purging a Blogger Who Offends Sets a Very Dangerous Precedent. Freedom of speech applies even to Holocaust deniers." And so what I thought I would do today is read you that article wherein I came out in defense of keeping Satoshi Kanazawa as a blogger, and that let his words come back to haunt him if he's wrong. So here we go. This is now the article that I'm reading from May 2011, and I'll place the link to the article at the bottom of the descriptor below this clip. So here we go. When I was a doctoral student at Cornell, a big debate raged on campus about whether an infamous Holocaust denier should be permitted to speak at our institution. The decision at numerous elite schools was to offer this clown a forum in which he could spew his horrifying anti-Semitism. I would hope that most readers might agree that to publicly deny the brutal and inhumane extermination of 6 million human beings is more offensive than Kanazawa's latest post. Guess what? Many Jews, myself included, reluctantly support his right to make a fool of himself, although it is unclear that denying blatant historical facts should be, quote, debated. Let his words come back to haunt him. Last August, a fellow blogger started a thread in the Green Room, the private chat room for bloggers on Psychology Today, as well as wrote a post, and I've linked to it in the article, in which he vigorously attacked me for having written a post on a study conducted by a French psychologist on the links between a woman's breast size and the likelihood of her being picked up as a hitchhiker. Numerous fellow bloggers joined in the attacks. However, I defended myself vigorously, and eventually the issue died down. I wish that I could share some of the moralizing, grandstanding, and personal attacks that were levied at me, but it is a confidential space reserved for bloggers. The blogger in question criticized me for the manner in which I had reported the findings of the study, even though I reported them in exactly the same way as originally done in the paper in a peer-reviewed journal. Numerous people came to my defense, most notably Robert Kurzban, then one of the editors of Evolution and Human Behavior and fellow Psychology Today blogger, to reiterate that I had been utterly accurate and proper in the way that I had reported the findings. However, the real gist of the attack was much deeper than a data analytic one. I was accused of engaging in, quote, pornography peddling, not only for discussing such a sexist topic, but also for using a teaser image of an attractive woman with large breasts in the passenger seat of a car, i.e. the teaser image was perfectly congruent with the topic of the post. The blogger who started the personal attack was clear in stating that such topics should not be allowed on the Psychology Today blog, even though I was discussing a paper that had been published in a peer-reviewed journal. The attack was jarring, emotionally draining, and hurtful. On one other occasion, a few bloggers were, quote, offended that I had used the teaser image of an attractive woman covered in chocolate for a post on the links between women's sexuality and chocolate consumption. Of course, I have also discussed issues wherein I used photos of scantily clad men, but in those instances I never heard any complaints. The moral and thought police was on vacation. I am readdressing these personal examples here to demonstrate the dangers of acquiescing to perceived offenses. I repeatedly criticize religion in my posts. What if someone now proclaims that my anti-religion analyses are offensive to their spiritual sensibilities? In a recent post, I called into question religious organizations that seek to argue that homosexuality could be changed via religious, quote, interventions. My position is clear, is certainly very offensive to those who truly believe that praying to some instantiation of God will make someone, quote, turn away from their otherwise, quote, sinful sexual orientation. In his blogging career, Satoshi Kanazawa has generated much offense. There is no question about that. However, I would offer a different solution to purging him from this forum, as several bloggers have suggested, i.e. that he be removed. Let his words be available for public consumption and permit people to evaluate his writings and shred them to pieces when warranted. With that in mind, bloggers should perhaps not be allowed to disable their comments section, as has been the practice of Kanazawa. although I can appreciate that this is an attempt by some bloggers to protect themselves from at times unwarranted venom and nastiness, as generated more often than not by anonymous readers. Bottom line, the collective and perhaps understandable reflex is to purge Kanazawa from this forum, remove the offending party, and life will return to normal. However, this sets an extraordinarily dangerous precedent for very obvious reasons. I am well aware that this is an issue of editorial discretion and not government censorship. That distinction notwithstanding, we all lose whenever an outfit restricts or delimits what can or cannot be said or debated. Please understand that I'm not dismissing the obvious hurt that Kanazawa's post has engendered. This, however, is not the point of this post. If we genuinely believe in free speech, then we must defend the right of those who offer opinions, ideas, and analyses that are grossly offensive to us. Example, a Jewish person defending the right of a Holocaust denier to share his or her views at leading world-renowned universities. Short of speech that seeks to incite violence or the proverbial shouting fire in a crowded theater, we should be very careful about quelling our most inalienable right, namely the free exchange of ideas. We do not have the inherent right to be protected from offensive, idiotic, hurtful, or silly speech. Ignore it, debate it, attack it, don't suppress it. Thank you for taking the time to entertain my thoughts on the matter. I wish everyone a good weekend. And then a few days later, I wrote an addendum wherein I said the following. Yesterday, Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman put up a post wherein he, along with Dr. Jelte Wischertz, analyzed the ad health data and refuted the conclusions arrived at by Dr. Kanazawa. In other words, by allowing ideas to be debated, criticized, and attacked, even offensive ones, the truth has a way of finding the light of day. I originally wrote these exact words as a response to a reader who recently experienced prejudice in her romantic life and who was understandably offended by Kanazawa's post. So to link this back to Milo, look, he can have a very jarring style. He could be offensive to many people. This is understandable. I see it. Some of his antics I'm not particularly fond of. But again, there's a very clear set of criteria by which we should collectively decide that someone no longer deserves the right or the protection of freedom of speech. From the little that I've heard of the story with Milo, it does not seem that any of those criteria have been met. Maybe he was a mean guy. Maybe he should have been more decent. Again, I don't know. But unless he threatened her, unless he engaged in libelous or defamatory comments or actions, then leave him up there and let the people collectively decide whether he is an asshole or not. Look, if people think that he is not a good guy, then maybe they'll stop following him. Maybe they'll punish him in all sorts of free ways. But again, extraordinarily dangerous to always go to the reflex of somebody says or does something that we don't like, let's purge him from our existence. Have a good day, everybody. Ciao.